Good evening and welcome to a special discussion right here on News First. Our focus this evening is about Maldives. What happened on the 7th of February? How did Mohammed Wahid, the president of Maldives, appointed as the president of the Maldives? To discuss all this and more, we have with us this evening the president himself. A very good evening, sir, and welcome to a special discussion. Let's start off with events that unfolded on the 7th of February when President Nasheed resigned. He said that he was under duress. Was it really a coup?
I thought we have left this question behind. It's been 6 months now, and you've had a chance to listen to various sides. Because, Mr. Nasheed himself raised issue with the transition, and therefore he made very serious allegations about a coup d'etat in Maldives. We immediately responded to that. I responded to that by setting up a presidential commission of inquiry to find out exactly what happened. So your question can be best answered when that report is out.
Let me
but in the meantime,
interrupt you
yes.
for a second, Mr. President. You said that Nasheed changed his mind. Why do you think Nasheed changed his mind 24 hours after he resigned from the post of president?
Because he knows the answer best. We can only speculate. My sense of it is that he realized that he had made a mistake. And he probably had people in his party who disagreed with him on this and who wanted to do something about it. Clearly, a lot of people's hopes were dashed by the decision that he made in his resignation. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I'm not surprised that he was forced to come back and say, this is irregular, and therefore, he was forced to go, and so on. But, he will know the reasons best.
Mr. President, you said Nasheed did mistakes. What are the mistakes he did?
You see, you have to see this in a historical perspective. Not a very long history, but the recent history of Maldives has been a struggle to establish democracy. And the election in 2008 was a turning point when he and I teamed up together. I became his running mate, and we ran for the election. First round, we didn't win, the two of us. Then we made a coalition with other parties. I'm also from a different party from Nasheed. We made a coalition of about 5 different parties, and we were able to barely win that election. But soon after, people assumed that democracy arrived. Democracy, we are learning the hard way that it doesn't just come overnight. It's a process, it's a journey. And 2008, of course, was an important milestone, but that wasn't the arrival of democracy in Maldives. Many of our partners, many of our international partners particularly, assumed that there is democracy in Maldives, and therefore they could take a step back. In the meantime, Nasheed administration, in which I was vice president, I got sidelined because I didn't join his own political party.
Is it because he did not trust you, Mr. President, that you were sidelined?
He didn't trust me because I wasn't in his party, but he trusted me enough to agree with me, come to an agreement with me to win the election. And specifically, we had an agreement of power sharing. I'm supposed to get certain number of positions in the cabinet, mm-hmm. and in political appointments and so on, which he did not respect. And I'm not the only one. There are other coalition partners also which he didn't respect their agreements, and therefore the coalition was dismantled. He wanted to strengthen his own party and then rule the country as an MDP government. Mm-hmm. Often people began to refer to it as an MDP government and so on.
Mr. President, you served as the vice president of Nasheed's cabinet for 3 years, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 as well. I want to know, Mr. President, why didn't you object to the actions of Nasheed?
I did object to various, at different times during the 3 years, I did object to things that I didn't agree with. Specifically came out and said, the president and the vice president don't get elected to rule for a particular party. Once we are elected as president and vice president, we are supposed to serve the whole country, not a particular political party. And that got me into trouble right from the beginning. But that was my stand. And then with the arrest of the criminal court judge, I opposed that because all along we worked for democracy, and the fundamental of democracy is freedom, or individual freedom. And when after the change in 2008, at least we assumed that we would not be picked up middle of the night and sent off to an undisclosed location. And when that happened with the assistance of the military, it completely crushed any hope that we had, that we have now made this democratic transition, and that we have the guarantee of individual freedom.
Mr. President, if you did not agree with Nasheed's stand at that time, why didn't you resign as a vice president and take an independent approach to this whole issue?
This would have been exactly what he wanted, because I was not from his party. With my resignation, he doesn't have to go to an election. He would simply appoint his own person as vice president, and there would be no check whatsoever on the administration. He didn't just serve this vice presidency on a plate. I worked for it. I brought credibility to his candidacy. I went out and campaigned for it. I spent money on it, and therefore I also had a right to continue to remain.
Mr. President, did you know the events that were going to unfold on the 7th of February this year in the Maldives with regard to the resignation of former President Nasheed?
What do you mean, did I know?
Did you know the events that unfolded on that day? Because you met opposition parties right before this incident took place.
I see, okay. I want to reject any, assumption that I had prior knowledge of what was happening. In fact, nobody had prior knowledge of what was happening. Mm-hmm. The situation happened because of the president's inability to control the situation, inability to manage the situation, and it got out of his control, out of his hands. It was never planned by anybody. He never foresaw it coming. We never foresaw it coming. But there were a series of events that happened starting from mid-January, in which protests started building up. In fact, even before that, in December, with the massive rally in Male against the government, and then the president being challenged for the first time in a very meaningful and very dramatic manner. And his response to that was starting to arrest his critics.
The resignation of Nasheed comes in light of many issues, as you did correctly mention, Mr. President. I want to drag your attention to the removal of the Chief Justice of your country. I want to ask you a question. I want to know, Mr. President, do you have faith in the current judicial system in the Maldives?
You see, I have faith in the system in Maldives. None of the institutions are perfect. The democracy in Maldives is very, very young. And this applies to all the branches of government. For the first time, we have a constitution that is a very idealistic constitution. It has never tried before. And therefore, there are problems with it, with the constitution itself.
Isn't this why, Mr. President, that Nasheed removed the Chief Justice of your country?
But you see, under the new constitution, even the president doesn't have the authority to remove a judge. There is a process for it. And, you cannot break the law and undermine the constitution and undermine rule of law in the name of trying to improve the system.
But the general notion, Mr. President, is the fact that the judicial system in the Maldives is corrupt and consists of individuals of Mr. Gayoom.
Same accusations can be made with regards to all the institutions of government in Maldives. It's not only the judiciary. We cannot single out judiciary just because the judiciary refuses to arrest, detain people, that President Nasheed wants.
Mr. President, many say that you act based on the whims and fancies of Abdul Gayoom, the former president of the Maldives. How far is this claim true?
This is not true. See, the former president, Mr. Gayoom, still happens to be a provisional leader of one of the political parties. Mm-hmm. And when I assumed my responsibilities as president, I knew that the situation in Maldives was a very precarious one. It's a delicate one. And therefore, I felt it was important to create a government of national unity. I invited all political parties, including Mr. Nasheed's party, to participate. In fact, their chairperson participated in the first meeting.
I agree with the efforts that you have taken to form a national unity government in your country. However, my question now to you is, Mr. President, that you have appointed a retired colonel as defense minister, you have appointed Mohammed Jamil as home minister, both of whom were supporters of President Gayoom. Then you have the daughter of Mr. Gayoom as the state minister of foreign affairs as well. Will we see a slide back to dictatorship in our country?
No,
because we saw the manner in which for 3 decades Abdul Gayoom was ruling the country.
These are the kind of fears that Mr. Nasheed has been trying to promote in the minds of for particularly our foreign observers. This has no real basis for it.
So, Mr. President,
we have fought for democracy in our country as much as Nasheed has. Nasheed is known to the rest of the world because of his street-level activities. But you don't have to be on the street to fight for democracy. I was fighting for democracy in the 80s. I was the first person to ever run a modern campaign in Maldives. My entire family, went into prison. So we have been part of this democratic process. And therefore, it is wrong to assume that suddenly we have decided to change course and go back to old dictatorship.
Mr. President, my question to you was, you appointed 3 individuals